But what do you think of what you have heard, the priorities that we heard there, were, of course, NHS, education, housing, defence, asylum seekers in hotels, prison places, police? What did you think of what you heard? 0345 6060973. That's the number to get in touch. You can WhatsApp on the same number. You can text 84850 or ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC. Now, I'm very glad alongside me, I've got LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark. Good afternoon to you. Natasha, there wasn't much in there that we didn't already know, but I don't know if that's the important bit. What is the important bit?
I think, Aasmah, the important bit is yet to be revealed. It's all going to be in the small print, in the details of the documents that have just in the last few minutes dropped on the government website, which we will be pouring through this afternoon. It seemed to me like it was interesting to see what Rachel Reeves's priorities were. But like you say, again, we sort of did already know what they were going to be. NHS, defence, schools, more money for all of these so-called government priorities. But like we said earlier, that means that there is going to be cuts elsewhere. We cannot prioritise everything. We don't have the money to do so. And as you just heard from Mel Stride, the government are borrowing quite a lot of money to put this infrastructure in place and to invest more for the future. So the devil will be in the detail. What exactly is going to be in the documents? Where are the cuts going to fall? Which departments are going to have their budget squeezed? And we don't know that just yet. It felt a little bit like lots of press release announcements from the government being discussed right now, but not actually the detail of exactly how you're going to get there. I think for the Chancellor today, it was about trying to send a message of this is what you're going to get under a Labour government. This is what you're going to see more of in the next few years. And of course, the government has spent the last year trying to say the Tories left us an absolute mess. We are now going to turn the page from that. We have started to stabilise the public finances, started to stabilise the country, and now we actually can start to deliver on all that change that we promised you last year. So this is them sort of setting out their big picture, I think, for what that will look like. So defence spending she talked about, confirmed to hit 2.6% by 2027, but no mention of that going up to 3%, as we know needs to happen. She talked quite a lot about Border Force Command, an extra 280 million for our Border Force Police. She promised to end asylum hotels in the next Parliament. That's clearly going to be a priority for the government going forward. It does, of course, mean that there could be potentially another 4 more years of those asylum hotels, because they have promised to end them, but they've promised to end them by the end of the Parliament. She, interestingly as well, took aim at Nigel Farage in her statement. Not something you usually hear from a Chancellor of the Exchequer when they're making a statement. It's usually just the opposition leader that they tend to go for. So that was interesting. Not just once, but twice she aimed at him, talking about the NHS. A very nice joke about Nigel Farage spending too much time in the pub in the Two Chairmen around the corner here in Westminster. But I think for her today, really what people at the end of the day are going to be thinking about is her language about renewing Britain. Do people feel better off? And are they going to feel better off in the next 3 years? What exactly is that going to look like? We don't know. We're going to be waiting to see the detail in this spending review documents. But her talking today about how she's making her choices. This is what a Labour government looks like. I'm choosing stability, investment. These are the choices of the British people. I'm going to deliver. Is that something that people relate to? Is that what you thought you were going to get when you voted for Labour in the last election? But lots of stuff to get in there. She obviously wants people to feel like she's turning on the spending taps, but the devil is going to be in that detail. Where are those cuts going to come from? We don't know that just yet.
And how long will it take for that to become apparent? I know that there's a lot of documentation that has to be gone through line by line. How long before there's a bit of an outcry? Because that's generally what always happens.
Yeah, well, as soon as we get into the details of those budgets, basically seeing how much in real terms they're going to be able to go up, we can compare them to the last time that they were made. What the OBR scored them, as the Office for Budget Responsibility said at the spring statement and at the last budget. We've already got a little bit of a hint in some of the language that the Chancellor was using today, talking about policing getting a 2.3% per year in real terms increase. However, she talked about sort of spending in general, which makes me think potentially that money might be coming from somewhere else. It might be coming from increased taxes from local authorities, for example. She might allow those to go up instead. So that is one thing I think we will be digging into, because that's something that Yvette Cooper, we know, has been talking for, well, not Yvette Cooper, the police have been talking for days about how they are going to they're fearing that they're not going to have enough money for the police. And yes, it will be basically just comparing the departmental budgets from these documents to the last ones. She talks to us well about the NHS. There's going to be more money, she says, for the NHS, 3%. That's not quite as much as we sometimes is spent on the police. I think last time, if I remember correctly, I think it was around 3.2% was spent extra on the NHS. And again, you saw on the front page of the Times today, is that going to be enough to drive down those waiting lists, as Labour have promised? This is all about whether the government have enough money, whether they are spending enough in the right places to deliver all of the things that they already promised us in that last election last year.
Messaging is always very interesting, isn't it? Because Rachel Reeves kept saying, this is my choice, this is Labour's choice. That was her kind of tagline, which became a bit irritating after the 14th time. But you can understand why politicians do it. I don't know how effective it is. But what about what the Conservatives were saying there? Planting a kind of seed that she's a spend now, tax later Chancellor, that her spending plans are a fantasy, and that all this is going to do is lead to a cruel summer of speculation. I mean, that's a bit disingenuous, because that speculation is going to be fueled by the Conservatives, no doubt, about whether Rachel Reeves is going to put taxes up in the autumn. How effective do you think a seed of doubt that is?
I think it probably will be, purely because last year, you'll remember, Labour repeatedly said they weren't going to raise taxes, and then they did in the budget. And, you know, Rachel Reeves will say this was because we had to fix the problems that the last Tories left us. But a lot of people feel that was a bit of a disingenuous thing to have done, and in that way. So I think what the Tories will be doing, talking about the idea that she might go ahead and do another budget like that. Now, when my colleague Aggie Chambray asked her last week about whether she would do that, she said, look, I'm not going to do a budget like that ever again. I don't want to do a budget like that ever again. But no Chancellor wants to raise taxes. Of course they don't. But we know how much of a precarious situation the public finances are in. All of this investment needs to grow the economy, or she's going to have to look for some other ways to plug the gaps in our spending. So I don't think it's a bad argument to make. And I think, you know, traditionally, the Conservatives have made hay of that argument, saying Labour are going to put up your taxes. And, you know, the first budget we've got from Rachel Reeves, she has put up taxes. So I think it is a legitimate argument for them to make. But yes, it's obviously a bit rich for the Conservatives to say so when they put up taxes repeatedly year after year after year, and saw the tax burden, you know, reach the highest ever on record. So they've not really got a leg to stand on that one either.